Today we want to welcome Andy Katz. Andy is a good friend of X-Rite and Sony. He's an X-Rite Colorati. He's a Sony artist of imagery. We are just delighted to have him here in this co-sponsored webinar with X-Rite and Sony. You can access his website at andykatzphotography.com. There you'll find all kinds of information about Andy, about his workshops. He'll be at the Palm Springs Photo Festival this year. And without further ado, take it away. Out in Palm Springs, I'll be there as well. If you're there, please stop by and say hello to us. And consider signing up for that great event if you have not. Andy has 12 books to his credit already and has visited 90 countries. He also has a wonderful new show opening in New York on May 29th. You can check that out on his website as well. He's just an all-around fun guy, and we're very, very happy to have him with us. Andy, welcome, and without further ado, take it away.
Thanks so much, Brenda. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate everyone listening, taking their time out of their day, morning, night, depending on where you're listening from. But again, thanks so much. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Sony cameras for just a second. As you can see in this slide, when you have a Sony camera, you don't even have to go to the subject. The subject comes to you. They're wonderful, wonderful cameras. A couple of things that I like the most about the Sony cameras. One is it's got a absolutely phenomenal image stabilization system. It's one of the only cameras that has image stabilization in the sensor itself, not the lens. So any lens that's put onto this camera is stabilized, and it's stabilized to a good 3 stops. I did a demonstration when I was in Africa. I photographed some elephants out of the 400 millimeter without the image stabilization. I believe it was at something ridiculous, like 1/8 of a second. And without the image stabilization, it looked like an abstract painting. With the image stabilization, it wasn't tack sharp, but you certainly could tell that it was elephants. It really does an absolutely amazing job. The other thing about the camera, well, there's so many things, but one of the other things I love about these cameras is they're built beautifully. I've taken mine through every weather condition. They're very light, and their sensors are truly remarkable. The lenses, I feel, we all have our opinions here, but I feel they're the best lenses in the world, the Carl Zeiss lens and the Sony G lenses. And the lenses that I use generally are my favorite lens, which I think is the greatest lens ever made, is the 24-70 f2.8 Carl Zeiss lens. I probably could get by just with that lens in a body. That's what I use probably 80% of the time. Also, I use the 70-400, which is a long lens that's actually quite compact and quite light considering what it does. 16-35 is another lens of choice that I have, and with those 3 lenses, I am totally set for anything that I need. Talking about X-Rite for a second, I think it's a very simple thing that unless your monitor is calibrated and you want to do anything such as sharing images, sending images to clients, sending images to labs to print, anything like that, if your monitor is not calibrated, you're relying on the presets of whoever made that monitor, which is not going to be correct. I guarantee you it's not going to be correct. This is going to cause amazing amount of frustration, as well as it's a high monetary fee. I mean, this X-Rite equipment will pay for itself in a very, very short period of time. If you send an image from your monitor that's not calibrated to a lab, for example, and then they send you the print back, and all of a sudden it's way green, and your monitor doesn't show that it's green, it's not the lab's fault. It's your fault for not having a calibrated monitor, and it's not something like you can call the lab and go, it's too green. I want more yellow in the green. Things don't work that way in this field. It has to be exact, and the only way to make it exact is to calibrate it. So I can't encourage you enough to calibrate your monitor. And if you're printing, you absolutely have to have ICC profiles. Otherwise, you're totally guessing, and that gets really expensive. So anyway, let's go on a little bit to travel photography, what I love to do, what I do all the time, and I just think it's probably the most enjoyable, one of the most enjoyable things one can do. And when I do these shows, I think a lot of times I probably learn more than you guys will learn in that, checking out images and trying to present a show, I realize how often I use hands in my photography of people. And I think hands and eyes are probably the most expressive, two most important things in portrait photography. This was an image taken in Budapest. I did a project called Vanishing Jewish Societies of Eastern Europe, and it was areas obviously that there were a lot of Jews, and because of the Holocaust, there aren't there aren't as very many now. And I went to all the most wretched places on earth, the concentration camps of Eastern Europe, and photographed that. And this was in the Jewish ghetto in Hungary. And I photographed this couple, and they were a lovely looking couple. Their faces were actually very interesting. So I photographed their faces, and then I photographed just their hands. And I found that just the hands told a better story and a more powerful story than their faces and their hands. Again, this is, I think the hands are a very important part of this photograph. This is taken in India. I just finished a book on India. It's not out yet, but one of the great countries on earth to photograph, and plenty of subject matter. If anyone's trying to figure out a place, where can I go and take some amazing photographs? Hands again. I mean, this image is pretty much of hands. This was when I was listening to the Dalai Lama. Me and 60,000 of my closest friends were listening to him, and it was a pretty amazing event because people came from all over India to listen to him. This was an image in a Buddhist temple. One of the real advantages of this image sensor is, there's no tripods allowed in the temple. I shot this at about 1/8 of a second, and it's absolutely tack sharp. Very simple window lighting. This was in Holi, the festival of Holi in India, where they take water and color and throw it on you, or just take this dye and throw it on you. And I was very, very multicolored at the end of this, and my camera was soaking wet with colored water, and it never stopped clicking. This is a project that I'm doing in Namibia. I'm doing a book for a children's organization, and this is a book that I'm doing on Namibia. And when you have a subject, I mean, this is a great subject. A lot of times people will take a picture that they want and then just go on to the next, or just move away, and I think that's actually a pretty big mistake. There's times where you could look at your subject and go, well, gosh, maybe I'll get closer, or maybe I'll go from a different angle. And a lot of times the first idea that you had for the photograph is not the best one. And the way I approach it is I photograph what I want first. In other words, this was the first photograph I took. I took the photograph of hands. Then I thought, well, it's a great subject, and the subject doesn't seem to be bored with me, and she's going to hang with me. So then I backed off a little bit, and I took a wider angle shot of her with her dress and that beautiful yellow scarf that she had. And which one you like better is whatever, but it just gives you an option of, when you get back home, you have different images that you can choose from. And perhaps what you're doing, whether you're doing a book or an article or just doing something for your wall, that you might need a horizontal, not a vertical. And that's very important, that you have a variation of images. Now, obviously, there's some images, like this one, that I had time to take one image, because these were beggars in Sri Lanka that came up to my car when I was there, and I just photographed this one image. But you know, if there's time, you know, it's always nice to vary what you're photographing. The other thing I learned, this is in South Africa, the other thing I learned that I like a lot, I guess it's not a matter of learning, I knew it, is I love images that are backlit. I think backlit images are very, very powerful. And, you know, with images like this and any other backlit image, a lot of times you do have to wait. Yeah, in other words, this cloud went in front of the sun here. Before that, it was way too much flare on the lens, and way too direct for the sun on the lens, and not anywhere near as nice a shot as far as I was concerned. A lot of photography is waiting, as you all know. You can certainly take a picture and then leave, but the chances are if you wait a little bit longer, things have a tendency to get more interesting. And you know, it's generally the best photographs are taken, or at least the photographs that I enjoy of my own the most, are taken either really early in the morning or late afternoon as the sun is rising or the sun is setting, or right after the sun is set or right before the sun has risen. A lot of times it's nice if you have something to block the sun from you. It creates a very long shadow, and it creates very interesting light as well. So just moving around, checking out the different spots of shooting. If I moved a little bit to the left on this, that glare would be all in the lens and you wouldn't have those rays there. You know, perhaps that's what you're after, but at least this gives you the option of doing something that would be possibly more of what you had as initial idea, that you wanted something very powerful in the background, splitting up with rays with the vine lit. And so don't forget, when you're shooting, there's no reason why you have to stand up straight and shoot. You know, you can get on your knees and shoot. You can bring a little ladder to shoot on. You can move to the left. You can move to the right. You can go from a different angle. This was taken in the Carneros area of Napa Valley, very strongly backlit subject. Again, if this was taken an hour or two before, I don't think it would be anywhere near as dramatic a photograph. This is in India. This is when I took with the NEX7. When you're traveling, it's really good to be prepared and to be ready and to have your f-stops set up and your shutter speed set up, because you never know what's going to happen. This was early in the morning, and this gentleman started doing this ceremony. To be quite honest, I have no idea what this ceremony represented, but I think visually it was a pretty interesting photograph. So I did have my camera there. I didn't expect this to happen, but once it happened, I was prepared, because I always knew, you know, for this lighting condition, you know, this is the ISO I wanted. I'm probably going to go with this shutter speed and this f-stop. So you generally have to come up with some sort of an idea of what you're interested in for that particular lighting condition, and be prepared for that, because when something happens, you just simply put your camera to your eye and then shoot away without missing your subject by going, oh my gosh, I've got the wrong ISO, this is what I shot yesterday, etc. I've done, oh my gosh, probably about 6 books on wine, and this is a backlit image, you know, I've done a lot of projects on vineyards. You're trying to come up with something that might look a little bit differently, and trying to make a grape look like a light bulb. I was in Greece, and I went to this church, and there was this painting of Jesus on this wooden board, and I had a tripod with me, and I put it on a long exposure, and I had a candle lit, and I went behind the wooden board and went up and down the crack, so there'd be a strong glow going through it, kind of similar to if there was you know, a backlit window there, which there was not. This is, you know, the what makes this photo is, you know, a great sunset, and you know, we're all really lucky when we get you know, great light, but we become much luckier when we wake up early and shoot late. You know, the harder we work, the luckier we get. Early morning, Tuscany. I did a book called Tuscany and Its Wines, and this is an early morning farmhouse in Tuscany, and the sun was coming up. And again, a backlit early morning shot. You know, you use the shadow to create depth, to create interest, and also just to create a interesting pattern on this grass. But the photo, as far as I'm concerned, is more about light than anything else. Window light is wonderful. I love window light. It makes my life so easy. This was taken in a church in Tuscany. It was in a book that I did called Tuscany and Its Wines. And the books that I do on wine, really, there's very little, practically no images. I could say there's no images of any glasses, and there might be one image of a bottle. And I think out of the 6 books that I've done on wine, there's one image of a bottle. So, but what it does allow me to do is to photograph anywhere I want in the area of wine country, because I consider this is part of wine country. So in any case, tripod, long exposure. You don't care about that highlight being blown out with the window. It's you'll never get detail. You don't want detail there, but you let the light just kind of creep through and envelop the whole area and illuminate everything. And you know, when you leave the shutter open, magic happens. Simple photograph in Russia. You know, these flowers in a church next to window light. This is part of the project that I did on vanishing Jewish societies. Again, it's very, very simple. You know, the book in front of a window with that's backlit. No alteration of anything. I didn't even hold up a reflector. You know, I just find, I was talking to Brenda before we got on the on this webinar, and you know, we were talking about studio lighting, and I used to do a lot of studio lighting. I did record album covers, and I did a lot of work in my studio when I was living in Colorado. But I haven't done it in a long time. And studio light, I think wonderful, wonderful studio light looks like natural light. I mean, somebody who's a really good studio lighting guy can make it look like natural light. And to me, it's like, what the hell? I might as well just go to the source, go to natural light. This is, you know, this is in India, and I was invited in someone's house, and this is just all natural light through windows and such. And you're just getting, actually, I think, pretty interesting light on almost every person here. And when you're invited into someone's home and you ask, can you, I mean, you know, you start photographing, you really feel quite a bit at home, and the chances are you've got a lot of leeway of what you can photograph. A project that I did in when I was working on my book in Burgundy, this is a hotel. This was pretty much as it was, window light, simple window light, long exposure. Again, same thing. This is going back to India. I did tell this gentleman to look towards the light, but it's just, you know, it's just such simple light, and I think it's effective. I even like the way that the light illuminates the interior of his home. You could see where this man lives and the simplicity of where he lives, and then this door. And you know, one thing that I think that these Sony sensors do such an amazing job of is capturing all the highlights as well as the shadows, and the dynamic range is absolutely astounding on these cameras. Long exposures. This was taken at Olivier Leflevre's, a famous Burgundian producer, the book that I did on Burgundy. And this was at night. It was very dark. I mean, you could see the leaves, but you couldn't see them very well. And it was, you know, probably a half-a-minute exposure, and things come alive. Light does some very, very powerful and strange things when you have long exposures. Also, I think it's quite interesting to see where the photo takes you, whether it's a line, whether it's a row, whether it's a curve, whatever. I think it's a very important part of photography. You know, there's a bunch of rules out, the rules of thirds, and the rules of this, and the rules of that. I hate rules. I've always hated rules. Ever since I was a kid, I was never very good with the rule department. And I think that you know, when somebody formulates a way to photograph, it's just not a good thing. This was taken in Tuscany, and it was actually for a commercial assignment for a company there that owns this vineyard. It was a California company that owned this vineyard in Tuscany. Again, a row, a line, you know, a feeling of depth, a feeling of, you know, you could get in there and walk around. This is a Schramsberg, a very famous winery that produces sparkling wine in California. This is Namibia, and this is Namibian highway right here. This is about as good as it gets in Namibia. Generally, the roads are on dirt. And generally you are there with your car and your tires end up getting punctured. I had punctured about 3 tires while I was in Namibia, and Namibia's got the fewest people per capita, second fewest people per square kilometer of any country on Earth. So you could literally drive for 5 hours without seeing a person. You might see some zebras without seeing a car. So you're in a car and you've got 5 tires. When one pops, you got 4. If that pops, you might be on the side of the road for 4 or 5 hours before someone is there. And once they're there, there's not much they could do anyway except take you to the next village. This was photographed, again, this is another relatively long exposure. This was taken in Burgundy. That house was the house that I rented when I did the book, The Heart of Burgundy. And I was with my son, and the sun had set, and then this glow came up, and I told him to go down to the house and open every window and or curtain and turn on every light. And you could see when you know, when I show at galleries, when I print this large, you can see his shadow in the window of this photograph. And this was the cover of the book on Burgundy. I think a lot of times people make the mistakes when the sun sets, they grab their gear and they take off. And a lot of times after the sun sets, you just get this amazing glow, this beautiful, beautiful glow of remarkable light. So, you know, if you're going to watch the sun come up, don't forget to get there before the sun comes up, because before the sun comes up also produces some very magical light, as well as after the sun sets. New Zealand, I did a book on New Zealand, and this was another long exposure. This was taken, I would say this is probably about a 15-second exposure. Those shrubs are illuminated by car lights. There's a road relatively nearby, but every time a car came and put a little light on it, it kind of layered the light to the point where it illuminated it quite well. While I was shooting this, I absolutely got nailed by mosquitoes. So I came back. I liked the photograph. I liked the perspective. of it, and I didn't like itching for the next 2 days. India, just a wide angle prayer flag, so up about 18,000 feet. This was a photograph that I think it was 3 Photo Pluses, which is a big photo exhibit and photo convention in New York City at the Javits Center, that they blew this up 5 stories high. So they blew 3 of my images up 5 stories high. It was really kind of wonderful to see images of that size. But this was going back to being prepared and being ready to take a photograph. And you know, I had my camera kind of ready to go, and I was driving, and I saw this guy walking away, and the sun was just about to set. I mean, it was really, really close to being behind this mountain. So I jumped out of the car, and I took, I think, 3 or 4 photos of this gentleman. I was shooting at 30 or 50th of a second, so very, very slow shutter speed for a 400 millimeter lens. But fortunately, it came out extremely sharp, and everything worked out. But if I was fumbling and didn't know what ISO was on, and you know what the shutter speed, that might have screwed it up to the point where the sun would be behind that hill, and then all of a sudden that really beautiful light would be gone. And unfortunately, you can't bring it back. You can't bring it back with, you know, these aftermarket plugins. You know, natural light looks like natural light, and I've never seen any aftermarket product that would make mediocre light look like great light. It just either looks phony or it just doesn't do it. So we still have to wake up early, and we still have to shoot late. This was in Tuscany, early morning shot. You know, you do have a area where where you do have, I believe, quite a bit of depth, and it's just pretty light. Light sources. Any light source you can use, you use it. A lot of times, what was the photographer said, what's your favorite available light? And he said it's a light that's available. This was in Varanasi, the holy Ganges River in India, about 5:30 in the morning before the sun came up. This is where Indians come to die, and they're cremated here, and people bathe in this river, which if you and I bathed in would be in the intensive care unit. The water is some of the most polluted water in the world. It's virtually does not have any oxygen. It's H2O without the O part, so it's basically H. This is I just, you know, to see the Northern Lights was just so exciting. This was taken about 6 months ago in Iceland, and I was just like a kid in a candy store. Seeing light like this, I just went crazy. The other thing to look for, which is somewhat rare but is always exciting, is when you have like slits of light coming through, or just small areas where that's created by objects that are blocking a lot of light, where you get kind of a pinpoint light that's just hitting certain spots, and you really can come up with some of the most magnificent lighting where that happens. You know, I've seen people use it in effectively in studio situations, in shooting people, and outside with people where you know, just a very little bit of light actually hits onto the person, or whether it's a landscape where you know, only part of the landscape is illuminated by the light. It's a very, very wonderful way to use light. The hard part is to find it. This is another very, very long exposure. This was probably the longest exposure of any of the images here. This was prayer flags in Sikkim, and this was probably about a 5 or 6 minute exposure. But again, it just creates a very, very interesting lighting situation, and you really do end up with a heck of a lot more light than you could ever expect to have, even through the human eye. You're looking at it and it's dark, but when you open the lens up for a long, long, long time, open the shutter up for a long, long, long time, it's really quite phenomenal. You'll definitely get rewarded. Um, New Zealand, same thing, long exposure. That's the only light source there. On a tripod, just open the lens up and see what happens. Clouds do amazing things. Stars start coming up. This image was really pitch black. This is the second longest exposure. This was probably about 3-4 minutes. And in New Zealand, I was traveling with my son. He's going, "Dad, what are you doing? This is dark." And it really was dark. I couldn't see a damn thing, but I just liked what I could see. I liked, so I just let the shutter open long enough, and this is what happened. Same with this. You can see the stars are coming out. Just creates a really, it's a whole new way to shoot. I'm not saying don't shoot your normal way, but anytime you can experiment with something, or just no matter where you are, find some place that's interesting, and just as a curiosity, go and you start using really long exposures and see what comes about. This was in Israel, in the Wailing Wall. One of these gentlemen was getting married, and they were dancing around the wall. I did have a tripod at that time. This particular image probably could be successfully accomplished with the image stabilizer in the Sony, because I believe I took this in an 1/8 of a second or a 15th of a second. Obviously, those stones aren't going to move; they're going to be sharp. But these gentlemen are dancing, so there's going to be quite a blur there. I have to say that with digital photography and with this image stabilizer, it's made me slightly lazier than I should be, perhaps. I get away with not using a tripod as much as I used to, and there's other advantages of a tripod. It slows you down. It makes you really think a little bit more about composition, et cetera, et cetera. These are, again, long exposures. Everyone does this with water. It just creates a very mystical, just a nice feel to it. Depth of field. This is something that I believe that people are kind of forgetting about a little bit. I'm sure most of the people that are listening to this webinar are probably at the level that this is second nature, but a lot of people don't rely on depth of field. They just think it's a way to control how much light is hitting the sensor, and it really is quite important. I mean, this image I wanted wide open just because I wanted the foreground to be out of focus, so I could really kick into the eyes of the marble Buddha back there. And this one I wanted everything to be absolutely tack sharp, because I thought it's important that everything's tack sharp. I see people that are photographing mountains and things that are at infinity, and they're shooting an f/22, and there's just there's really no reason for it. It's probably not the best f-stop optically for the lens. You'd be much better off at shooting an f/5.6, f/8, and you could use a higher shutter speed. So realize when you are shooting what your f-stop is, and why are you there on that f-stop. I mean, is it important that you get a lot of depth of field? Well, you got to stop it down. Do you want a lack of depth of field? Well, you got to open it up. I mean, these are things that are very important in the process. Digital photography, I love digital photography, and the only thing that I could say is that with digital photography, and I don't want to get in the argument which is better, digital or film, but the only thing I can clearly say is that with digital photography, with my 35mm digital Sony Alpha 99, I can produce a 40x50 print that's sharpness, tonality, quite remarkable. I mean, very, very sharp. And with film, you just cannot do that. Now, you could make the argument, I like grain, I like the softness. That's a totally different discussion. but as far as clarity, there's just absolutely no comparison between film and digital. And the other thing that digital does have is that you have color images that reproduce into black and white really, really well. And there's a software program called Silver Effects, Nick Pro's Silver Effects, and it's a fantastic program. It makes converting to black and white incredibly simple. And what I look at is, does the color hinder or does the color help? And a lot of times it's very, very difficult. It's a very subtle thing. Do I like it better in color? Do I like it better in black and white? You try to figure that out, and a lot of times if it's really close, I'll just convert it to black and white, put it side by side, and figure out which image I like the best. Now for these, they're kind of close. For this one, I certainly like the black and white quite a bit better. I bumped the contrast up a little bit. I think it's a much more powerful image in that the colors don't, they don't help this image, and the black and white creates a much more, to me, a much more powerful image. Back in India, this is one of those tricky situations. I had my camera on a tripod. I'm photographing these prayer flags. The sun is setting. You can see in the background, and the flags were a little muddy. They were just not, the wind was blowing, so they weren't sharp. So I was with my son. He had a Sony point and shoot camera, and I said, when I tell you I'm going to do a 30-second exposure, 20-second exposure, I don't even remember, 1 second, probably it's closer to 1 second. I don't think it was that long exposure. I said, when I tell you, pop your flash underneath these flags, and he did, and I got this, and I've got a crisp image of the flags. I got some better color saturation from it. I got it defined it from the background a little bit better. Bad weather I love. There's nothing better than bad weather. My nemesis is blue skies. Shooting in blue skies is horrendous. You just have to find shade and wish for the best. But when you have bad weather, oh my gosh, it's so great. Whether you're shooting people, whether you're shooting landscape, fog is wonderful, rain is wonderful. As long as you have an umbrella to protect something, your lens. It's just a great way to photograph. So when clouds are getting stormy, get out there. I mean, that's an occasion where during the day, if you have a tremendous amount of clouds, you can still go out and shoot. Where in the blue sky during the day, I don't even bother taking. I mean, I don't shoot anything other than areas that are in shade. Fantastic, going to areas that you like, going back, hoping that something different might happen, like lightning. Again, this is an image that the sunset. Without the sunset, it would be nothing. My favorite light is when a storm is about to hit, and you get those black skies and just a little bit of bright sun hitting something. And this was in Burgundy, in an area called Carton, and it was just a fantastic time until it started raining, and I got completely soaked, and I was on a bicycle. But the light is just phenomenal when this happens, and anytime light like this is about to, when I see light like this happening, I grab my camera and try to go somewhere or run somewhere, because that's where you're going to get the most amazing photographs. Because in photography, there's three things you really have to have. You have to have content. The image has got to be of something of interest. You got to have composition. It's got to be composed correctly, and you got to have light. And unfortunately, in order to produce a really good image, you got to have all three. If one of those is missing, you're in trouble. I had to have a rainbow. I apologize to everyone listening. There'll be no kittens, but I do have one rainbow. That's my only rainbow, and I apologize. photographing from different angles, from different perspectives, is to me is absolutely critical. I mean, I photographed this gentleman in India, and really interesting looking character. You know, great orange top on, and I photographed him from this angle, which I really liked, and I could have just finished that and said goodbye, thank you, but I brought him around and took him to different spots. So, you know, as soon as, you know, I think I'm just saying this again because I think it's important, but as soon as you get your first images and you get exactly what you want, then after that is you know, is time to move around a little bit and take the person to a different spot. If they say no, I don't want to do this, I'm done with you, at least you have what you have in the can, as they say. But generally, when you're photographing people, they love to be photographed, and they'll probably really enjoy it. I think what people don't like is when people are photographing paparazzi style, when you've got a long lens and you're shooting from across the street and you're trying to sneak up on somebody. When I photograph people, it's, you know, they know I'm photographing, there's some sort of interaction there, communication. I talk to them whether they understand what the hell I'm talking about or not, generally not, even if it's English. And but at least I'm not trying to hide anything, I'm not trying to sneak anything, I'm just photographing them, and it's much more of an intimate type of thing. And out of all the people that I photographed, I'd say there's way less than 5%, probably less than 3% of the people would say no, they don't want to have their photograph taken. Again, this is one angle, this is another angle. Not sure which one I like better, but in any case, it's a different feel. This as well, this is her looking at me, and then I went from behind when she was leaving and walking away, and I photographed her like this. I actually like this photograph better than seeing her. This is in Namibia, same type of thing. This is a very interesting tribe where the women never shower. From the time they're born, they mix butter and sap from a tree that's sweet smelling, and kind of a brown clay that they mix into a paste and put it over their body every day, and that's what's in their hair as well. Close up. Same Himba tribe. I like to get close. Sometimes I get too close. So, you know, I have to caution myself often to kind of back off to because there's a lot of elements in a photograph that might tell a story that I'm missing if I get too close. But a lot of times when I look at other people's work, it's the opposite. They don't get close enough. They worry about getting close. This was a little, I take a little Sony strobe with me all the time. I've probably used it once this time in about 3 years. I don't like the look of flash on camera. I don't think to me it's not an appealing look. But I took the flash, and this was a dance troupe in India, and this was with fluorescent lights. So the lighting was absolutely horrendous, and I shot it at a slow shutter speed, took the strobe and bounced it against a white door, and I got something I think that I like the light in it. India again. This is the one studio shot that I took of a gentleman that I met who became a friend in Japan. We shot weddings, and this is his daughter, and I used just a flash with one umbrella. And Nigeria, the only place that I've ever traveled that I had a hard time with because I found it to be very dangerous. But I do like this photograph. I've been working on a project on children from around the world for probably about 30 years, and hopefully someday it will be published. This woman was in India, and the snake did not scare me at all, but the woman scared the hell out of me. She was a scary character. This was with the NEX7. You know, one of the great things about traveling is, you know, just fun things that you come up and see. The you know, roses with rope with you know with a bag around it, or you know, these great subjects that you just look upon and find, and you come back when the light's going to be lower, or you figure out how to move things for the light to be pretty. And I just think that, you know, traveling around, there's images are out there. There's every image you possibly want is out there. You just have to find them. And I mean, that's our job, is to go and find the images and make them count. And you know, you put a big effort into it, and you get rewarded. Again, close up, just walking in India. This is an offering. Close up of grapes, me getting a little bit close. This was the cover of my book on Sonoma, my latest book. This was, I was in Iceland quite recently, and I had finished shooting. I woke up early in the morning and got back, and the weather was miserable out. The wind was blowing like a son of a gun. It was raining, and I had a bottle of wine. I was ready to pop the wine and call in the evening. And generally, I think I'm very good about waking up early in the morning, shooting every morning, and shooting every late afternoon when I'm traveling or on assignment. And this time I went, maybe I'll just kick back, but I didn't. And I went out, and I got my favorite photo that I took in Iceland of this house. But the wind was blowing tremendously, and it was very difficult for me to hold the camera steady. So what I did is I shot about 17, 20 some odd photographs of the same image, just trying to be steady, because the wind was blowing the heck out of me. So I was shooting like 150th of a second, 200th of a second, and out of about 20 of them, about 3 of them were sharp, and I got the image. And I guess there's a lesson that even when you don't want to go out, go out. How's that for a lesson? This was a true story. This is a black desert rhino in Namibia that was coming out to kill me. It was charging me. I was in Namibia with a bunch of some rhino experts. These are black desert rhinos, very, very rare animal in the world. And this rhino had been in a fight. I was photographing it. I asked the 2 rhino experts with me if I could go over and photograph, and they said no problem. I went over, started taking a picture. The rhino looked at me and just charged, and it was coming after me. And I absolutely thought it was the coolest thing that's ever happened. I started photographing it to the point where this was it was getting too close. My lens couldn't handle it, and the rhino expert got in front of me, between me and the rhino charged him, and he kind of did like a bullfighter move, and the rhino went down in the ravine, and everything was fine. But that was the closest to death I've ever experienced. But what a way to go. My last photo is, I call her Devil Proof. She was in Cuba. I just came back from Cuba a couple weeks ago, and I tried to find her. In Cuba, if you drink rum and smoke cigars, the devil can't get you. So I call her Devil Proof. And I tried to find her, and unfortunately, I shot this about 20 years ago. Yeah, it's about 20 years ago. She died last year, which is really a shame, because I really wanted to see her again. My son's got a label coming out called Devil Proof. He's a winemaker. I forgot to mention that. And so if you're in the wine store and you ever see her on a label, it will be the world's best wine. And this is the equipment that I take with me, the 70 to 400 to the left, the 2 bodies of the Alpha 99s, the 16 to 35 f2.8, the 24 to 70 2.8, the NEX 70 with the 24 Zeiss lens, and the amazing RX 100 point and shoot that shoots raw, that you can produce. It's the world's greatest point and shoot camera, and that's not me saying that. That's a quote from the New York Times. So, Brenda, are you there? Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, we got tons of questions. We got
Oh, I'm
great
ready.
questions. So we
I
got
like
just
it.
a little bit of time. I'm going to
No
group these
worries.
together a little bit. We have several
Sure.
questions about exposure, exposing backlit images, ISO preference, sort of the highest you go. I think you covered that. You go to very high ISOs. But
Hmm.
how do you handle the noise? So let's talk about exposure,
Well,
ISO,
I'll,
and
yeah,
noise. Yeah.
I'll talk about noise first. I think that what causes noise is underexposure, and a lot of people do that. And a lot of people will look at the back of their camera if it's got these little, uh, you know, overexposure lights where they have blinkies. Well, the problem with that is those overexposure lights for blinkies, those are for compressed JPEGs. RAW can handle a lot more exposure than that. So if you expose so the highlights are slightly blown out, but that can be brought back into with Lightroom or any other program, and you don't underexpose the shadows, then you're not going to get the noise factor. Where noise really is evil is when you're underexposed, and those shadows become black, and what black becomes is noise. And there's programs to get rid of it, but it's much better to expose correctly. And yeah, that's as far as backlit subject. Anytime you have a subject, you have to be concerned of what is the most important part of the subject. I don't mind overexposing highlights a little bit. Now, when I say overexposing, I'm not saying blowing out, because once you blow it out, there's nothing you can do about it. But if it's a little bit hot, you can bring that back in Lightroom or your other program. So that's just something to get used to see how overexposed you can get and to bring it back. But I think what people do 80% of the time is people underexpose.
So on your long exposures, sort of how long? I mean, and how do you meter
They go,
those?
they go. Well, the great thing about long exposures is you almost don't have to. It's really hard to overexpose a 30-second exposure.
Hmm.
With you go 30 seconds to 60 seconds, and there's a difference, but you're not going to have these blown out highlights because you're talking about an area that does not have. If an area does not have a lot of light, you're not going to get you know you're not going to overexpose the heck out of it. That's
And
that's the great thing about it.
yeah, so one question about the exposure for the northern lights for the Aurora Borealis.
Hmm.
What about that? How'd you determine that exposure?
Um, just like anything else, really. It's a cloud basically, and you just expose for the cloud.
Okay. So you're using in-camera meters, not handheld, right?
I am, yeah. And when I was shooting film, I would have a spot meter,
Okay. Do you ever
100%
use
of the time.
polarizers or neutral density filters?
Once in a while, I do have a polarizer and ND filters with me. I don't use them that much. It's really surprising how infrequently I do use filters.
And what ND filters do you use? Do you carry with you?
I've got a graduated
Uh-huh.
4-stop and a 3-stop, I believe.
Okay. Next question is about you do your own printing, and there was a specific question about the very first image. When you print that, just what printer and paper you prefer on that image?
Well, I just started using the Ilford papers, which are unbelievable. And the one that I've got now is called Smooth Pearl, which is really nice paper. But I'm experimenting because they're coming out with some other papers. But the Ilford papers are just gorgeous. And the printer that I was using, I moved from California to New York. So I moved from a pretty large house that had a studio that I had a 44-inch HP printer in, to a apartment in New York that if I had that printer, I'd have to sleep on top of it. So it's in New York. I have a little Epson printer, which works great for test prints, and then I go to a lab when I have to print big prints, and I bring my prints with them, and they match it.
All right, so I've got three or four more questions and a couple of minutes to do it in. Do you
Sure,
use a publisher's agent for your book publishing?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do in the world of publishing. It's kind of a network where generally agents will get you the deal. It's very difficult to go directly.
And another question about model releases and location releases.
Model releases is a tough one. Model releases, well, a couple things. I'll have to plug ASMP. I think everyone who's a professional photographer, avid amateur, should be a member of ASMP. It's a very important organization that defends the rights of photographers. I mean, you and I can't afford a lawyer to go up to the Supreme Court for copyright and this and that. They can. As far as model releases, you should have a model release for everyone you photograph. Now, if you ask me, do I have a model release for everyone I photograph, the answer is absolutely no. The areas that I'm at, a lot of times, are very remote. The language difficulty is ridiculous. There's no way I'm going to know all the dialects to write model releases in those dialects. A lot of these people can't even write. So no, I don't. Now, if you're photographing for a commercial entity, you have to have a model release. But I'm not shooting for a commercial entity. I'm shooting for so it's a gray area, and yeah.
And I think you said before that you don't pay your subjects, right? You don't pay the folks that you're photographing.
I don't. I'm trying. I try to go to areas where they can't even relate to that. I mean, I mean, you can go to India to a lot of places where people are like they're like Vogue models. Every day the tourist groups come in and they pose with their with whatever dress they have, et cetera, et cetera. What I've tried to do in this project, and most projects, is to get to the more remote or the most remote areas that I can, where they don't see that many tourists, and the idea of giving them money for a photograph just doesn't make a lot of sense to them.
Now, how do you decide what you check and what you carry when you're traveling?
I don't check anything.
Okay.
I mean, the only thing I could possibly check, well, I shouldn't say that. The tripod I check sometimes. Uh, the second hard drive once in a while I'll check, but all the camera gear comes with me.
And we talked about backing up photos in the other webinar, so just say a little bit about backing up your photos when you're traveling.
Well, it's critically important. What I do is I bring two external hard drives, and at night, every time I finish shooting, I download the images, and I put one on one hard drive and one on the other hard drive, and I place them in different areas. In other words, if I put one hard drive in my suitcase, I'll put the other hard drive in my camera case, and I always split them apart just in case something which is not going to happen to you and doesn't happen to me is stolen. Then you have a backup. And if you're traveling for a long time, I've DHL'd hard drives back when I felt that it was a good idea to do that.
And we're totally out of time, but I want to ask you, we're going to close on this last question because we had several people ask different versions of this. How do you
Hmm.
engage people? How do you establish a connection with people when you're photographing them?
Well, I generally when I see somebody that I want to photograph, like I said during the presentation, I hope I said anyway, I'm not trying to sneak anything. I'm not trying to hide anything. So I go up to them, and a lot of times I'll start talking, and I'll start photographing them, and they'll be looking at me and look great, and I'll just say, God, that looks so great. You got beautiful. I'll just they won't know what the hell I'm talking about, but they'll still I'll still start talking to them and enjoying their company, and yeah, I mean it's just one of those things. I think it's you have to be open, you have to be friendly, and if they don't want to have their photo taken, you have to immediately realize that, put your camera down, don't try to sneak anything. What I do is I put my camera down by my side, I put my hand up kind of to wave at them, and I leave them because they want their own space, so I just completely leave them.
Andy, I remember the very first time I met you on a street in New York, and I remember how your smile, your laugh, and how engaging you were. So I think that personality thing and really being open to people is really what it's all about.
Well, thanks, Brenda. That's sweet.
Listen, we have really enjoyed this today, and thank you all so much for attending today.
Yeah,
Thanks to
thanks.
thanks to
Yeah, sorry.
Sony for co-sponsoring this. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I really appreciate you taking time. I know how time is valuable these days. And check out my website if you have any questions. You're welcome to ask. You can contact me through andykatzphotography.com.
Yeah, be sure to check out that website. We appreciate you coming today. Look for that email with the archive of the webinar, and continue to enjoy it. Come back to another X-Rite webinar again real soon. And thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.